Hello everyone. Today we're going to peel back the veil of time and stare directly into the paradox of destiny, a strange symmetry between death and birth, brilliance and frailty, stars and silence. Picture this. The world had barely awoken in 1942 when, on January 8th, a child was born under the war-scarred skies of Oxford. Just 3 centuries earlier to the day, Galileo, the man who dared to defy the cosmos with reason, had died. Now, a new challenger had entered the arena of the universe. Stephen William Hawking. Was it merely coincidence, or was fate sending a signal? What are the odds that 2 of the greatest cosmological minds would bookend a 300-year cycle to the day? Do you believe in fate, or do you trust randomness? The boy's home wasn't made of wealth or prestige, but of something far more rare: free thinking. Imagine an old, drafty British house, cold in the bones but warm in spirit. Meals were not filled with chatter of chores or school, but with debates about the universe, consciousness, and the rise and fall of nations. His father, Frank, studied tropical diseases. His mother, Isabel, mused over the scaffolding of human society. In that intellectual incubator, curiosity wasn't just encouraged, it was necessary. And yet in the echoes of those dinner table debates, no one could have known the boy with messy hair and a quiet voice would one day change the shape of space itself. Can a child of thought become the master of the cosmos? At Oxford, the young Stephen didn't follow the path most students took. He carved tunnels under it. He later confessed he worked, on average, less than an hour a day. Not because he was lazy, but because the questions were too small. Once, when handed an assignment full of errors, he returned to class not with answers but with corrections, red-marking the textbook itself. In a world that expects you to follow instructions, what happens when someone shows up to rewrite the manual? A peculiar episode occurred during his undergraduate years. He joined the university rowing team, not as an athlete, but as a coxswain, steering and strategizing. Despite his thin frame and delicate health, he commanded teams of powerful rowers. His ability to calculate trajectories and split-second tactics made him a campus legend. Can you imagine that? The future voice of the universe, yelling over river water, guiding boats through wind and competition. Why does it so often happen that brilliance finds its stage in the unlikeliest places? But then, like a shadow falling across a sunlit desk, came the diagnosis: ALS. He was just 21. Most people his age were dreaming of careers, relationships, and travels. Stephen was handed a death sentence, 2 years to live, give or take. The disease crept through his body like a silent storm, stealing strength, clarity, breath. And yet, while his muscles betrayed him, his mind staged a revolution. What would you do if your future was taken from you before it even began? Instead of retreating into despair, Stephen leaned further into the void. A few years later, he encountered Roger Penrose's theory on black holes. The two would partner up, a meeting of minds that rivaled any cosmic collision. Together they theorized that at the center of a black hole lies a singularity, a point of infinite density and zero volume. It wasn't just theory. It was poetry written in mathematics. Doesn't it strike you as odd that someone so close to death would become obsessed with the places where time itself ceases to exist? All the while his body was failing, his speech slurred, his limbs weakened, and walking became impossible. He needed help dressing, eating, even speaking. Yet his mind had never been stronger. Friends and family watched a tragic miracle unfold, an intellect expanding as the body imploded. Isn't that the very contradiction of genius? That sometimes its brilliance comes in the form of suffering? One story still echoes through academic halls. While defending his PhD thesis at Cambridge, Hawking's voice had already grown so weak that listeners had to lean in to catch every word. But those words were lightning bolts, questions about entropy, the boundaries of the universe, and the collapse of cosmic laws. The room went silent, not because of politeness, but because it had just heard the future whisper its name. Can silence itself sometimes be the loudest declaration of genius? As Hawking's fame slowly grew, so did the contradictions. Here was a man confined to a chair, yet he traveled more mentally than most do physically. He needed help brushing his teeth, yet he brushed away centuries of misunderstandings about the universe. His lectures grew packed. His name became a synonym for genius, and soon he became something rarely achieved: a celebrity physicist. But what does it mean when someone becomes both a scientific authority and a cultural icon? And so this section ends where the myth of Stephen Hawking truly begins, not in his theories or equations, but in the transformation of a fragile young man into a force that would outlast even his physical self. He wasn't just learning about the universe, he was becoming part of its narrative. So what do you think? Was his life shaped more by circumstance or by choice? By the mid-1960s, Hawking's physical condition had drastically worsened. He walked with difficulty, spoke with effort, and yet, in an extraordinary paradox, his mental clarity had sharpened into something crystalline. The constraints of his body seemed to drive his intellect deeper into the mysteries of existence. But the twist? His decline didn't lead to silence. It led to breakthrough. In the same year he married Jane Wilde, his first love and eventual caretaker, he began work on a doctoral thesis that would shake the very concept of the universe's beginning. What does it mean when love and theory are born in the same breath? That thesis, built on Penrose's black hole theory, led to the singularity theorems, a revolutionary idea that the universe itself, not just black holes, began from a singularity. A point where physics as we know it simply breaks down. For Hawking, this wasn't just an abstract concept. It was his rebellion against the limits placed on him. The man who could barely hold a pen was now writing the rules of cosmic origin. Isn't it ironic that someone trapped in time would be the one to rewrite its beginning? A bizarre anecdote floats around this period. During one lecture in Cambridge, the projector broke. Instead of panicking, Hawking calmly narrated every slide from memory, even including the transitions and animations. The students were dumbfounded. His machine may have failed, but his mind didn't. Does a genius shine brightest when circumstances fall apart? Then came the moment that changed everything. 1974. Hawking proposed an idea so counterintuitive, so elegantly maddening, that it lit up every research lab on Earth. He suggested that black holes weren't black at all. According to quantum theory, particles could appear near the event horizon of a black hole, and if one escaped while the other was consumed, the black hole would appear to radiate energy. This Hawking radiation would eventually cause black holes to shrink and vanish. Could the very thing we thought destroyed everything actually emit something? Could death emit life? This shook the foundations of theoretical physics. It meant that black holes weren't eternal prisons. They could evaporate. Information, perhaps, might not be lost forever. This wasn't just a theory. It was a philosophical bombshell. Suddenly, the laws of thermodynamics and quantum mechanics had to sit at the same table. Was Hawking rewriting physics, or was he simply translating the universe's oldest language? And then, tragedy again. In 1985, while attending a conference in Switzerland, Hawking developed pneumonia. For an ALS patient, it was nearly fatal. Doctors proposed a tracheotomy to save him, a surgery that would remove his ability to speak for the rest of his life. Jane, after agonizing deliberation, said yes. The surgery was performed. Stephen survived. But the world lost his voice, only to gain something even more powerful, a new one. His computerized speech system, originally operated with hand controls and later by cheek muscle, introduced the robotic, metallic voice that became synonymous with him. And in that moment, Hawking became something else. A symbol not just of intellect, but of the fusion of man and machine. The voice, though synthetic, echoed through the hearts of millions. Isn't it strange how the most emotionless voice can express such human resilience? Then came a book that changed everything again. A Brief History of Time. Released in 1988, it wasn't just a science book, it was a cultural phenomenon. Written in plain, non-mathematical language, it dared ordinary people to think about time, the universe, black holes, and quantum fluctuations. Against every expectation, it sold over 25 million copies. It was read in living rooms, on subways, even in prisons. A physicist who couldn't even lift a coffee cup had now become a global voice. Why do people crave understanding, even when the subject is the entire universe? One quirky fact. During the editing process of A Brief History of Time, his publisher warned that including just one equation might kill sales. So Hawking included only Einstein's famous E = mc2. The irony? It worked. The book was readable and engaging, without dumbing down the mind-bending concepts. He turned the black hole, once an obscure mathematical object, into something children now talk about. Can you imagine? Kids asking their parents if the universe had a beginning. As his fame soared, invitations rolled in from every corner of the globe. He met presidents, royalty, and even pop stars. One famous meeting was with Pope John Paul II, who, after discussing cosmology, supposedly urged Hawking not to investigate the Big Bang too deeply, as it was the moment of creation. Hawking, amused, later said he had just completed a paper arguing the universe had no boundary. The clash of belief and reason was never more cordial. Is there a line between science and faith? Or are they both seeking the same truth from opposite directions? Despite his worsening condition, Hawking continued to write, teach, and theorize. His works, like The Universe in a Nutshell and The Grand Design, weren't just follow-ups. They were clarion calls for a public still hungry for wonder. In The Grand Design, he argued again that the universe needed no divine creator. M-theory, quantum fluctuation, and laws of nature were enough. It was a staggering claim, not because it was hostile to religion, but because it was delivered with such calm logic. Can a simple equation ever replace the need for faith? Throughout all this, his family life was filled with turbulence. His marriage to Jane grew strained. She had devoted her life to his care, but the pressure was immense. In 1990, they separated, and he later remarried his nurse, Elaine Mason, a decision that sparked controversy and concern. Friends noticed bruises and changes in his demeanor. The media buzzed, but Hawking refused to discuss it. Was it the cost of greatness, or the shield of a man who had lived his life under constant scrutiny? Yet, through all this chaos, personal, physical, existential, Hawking kept pushing the boundaries of human understanding. He embraced his own paradox, physically bound, yet mentally limitless. And he knew the world was watching. Not just scientists, but dreamers, skeptics, believers, and doubters. He had become the scientist for the world, not because he had the answers, but because he had the courage to keep asking the questions. So tell me, do you think Hawking's real gift was knowledge? Or was it the strength to endure? Stephen Hawking didn't stop at black holes and time warps. In the last decades of his life, he transformed into something more urgent, more controversial, a prophet of scientific apocalypse. He began issuing warnings about the future of humanity, and unlike ancient seers or science fiction authors, his prophecies came not from visions or dreams, but from hard data and probability curves. These weren't bedtime stories. They were mathematical alarms. But here's the twist. Each warning was met with admiration and quiet dread. When a man who's beaten death speaks of the end, how seriously should we listen? His first major concern? Climate change. He warned that by 2032, Earth could fall into a self-amplifying feedback loop, ice caps melting, methane escaping, oceans rising. He compared the trajectory to Venus, a boiling surface, sulfuric acid rain, and 250 degrees temperatures. Earth could become uninhabitable, he cautioned. This wasn't hyperbole. He cited greenhouse gas trajectories and energy use graphs that rose like skyscrapers. His message? We're running out of time. Does it make you wonder, what if one of history's greatest minds believed we're already past the tipping point? Then came another jolt. Hawking didn't just say the Earth was dying, he said we'd need to leave it. By 2600, he warned, the Earth will be a fireball. Our only option? Colonize another planet. He pointed toward Alpha Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor, and called for a global push into space. We must become a multiplanetary species. Suddenly, his message overlapped with Elon Musk's ambitions. But while Musk talked rockets, Hawking was talking survival. Should space travel be a luxury for explorers, or a lifeboat for the human race? His next warning was colder, more terrifying. Artificial intelligence. Unlike those who feared Terminators or evil robots, Hawking offered a more subtle nightmare: indifference. He explained, if an AI's goals aren't aligned with ours, it might eliminate us as a side effect. Think of ants during dam construction, not hated, just irrelevant. His thought experiment sparked fierce debate. Could we build an intelligence too powerful to control? Even more chilling, what if we already were? The race for AI dominance had begun. Do you believe our technology might one day outgrow its creators? Then, as if warning of planetary doom and digital rebellion wasn't enough, Hawking issued a fourth prophecy: the rise of a genetically modified superhuman race. With tools like CRISPR, he foresaw a future where parents could engineer smarter, stronger children. At first it would be to prevent disease, but later, to upgrade everything. A new elite would emerge, not just rich, but biologically superior. Natural humans might become obsolete, even hunted. He spoke of this with sorrow, not science fiction flair. Those who are unenhanced could be pushed aside or eliminated. How do we balance the miracle of biotechnology with the nightmare of inequality? And finally, his most distant, most haunting vision: the complete collapse of Earth's habitability by 2600. Not climate change this time, but pure mathematics: population growth, energy usage, war, and waste spiraling upward until the planet itself ignites. Not metaphorically, literally, a fireball. He argued that our current rate of energy consumption could melt the crust. These were not casual claims. He had simulations, models, heat maps. If you think of Earth as a machine, Hawking was the one waving frantically at the dashboard, pointing to the lights flashing red. When did we start ignoring the warnings? Of course, not everyone agreed. There are still people arguing about the event story, as one popular blog put it. Debates erupted. Was Hawking too pessimistic? Too bold? Was he stepping outside his expertise? But even skeptics couldn't deny the gravity of his calculations. His predictions weren't emotional, they were logical. He wasn't trying to scare us, he was trying to prepare us. So then, what's more dangerous, a false alarm or a true one that we ignore? All of these predictions emerged from one central belief: that science, not mysticism, could chart our destiny. This brought Hawking to one final battleground: God. Though raised in a Christian home, Hawking grew increasingly convinced that the universe didn't need a creator. In the grand design, he presented the argument cleanly. Thanks to laws like gravity, the universe could spontaneously generate itself from nothing. But his concept of nothing was more complex, defined as a quantum vacuum bursting with negative energy. He compared it to digging a hole to make a hill. One cancels the other. The total energy? Zero. Did the universe create itself by balancing its own books? This concept shook many. The idea that something, everything, could emerge from a mathematical balance between positive and negative energy. No divine spark, no cosmic architect, just laws. When asked what existed before the Big Bang, he famously replied, "Nothing. Time itself didn't exist." If there was no before, there could be no cause, no creator. These weren't just statements. They were philosophical knives. What happens to belief when science erases even the question? Yet strangely, this view wasn't cold. It echoed Eastern philosophies like yin and yang, opposites in balance, darkness and light, energy and void. He often compared his theories to these ancient ideas, suggesting perhaps that science and spirituality weren't enemies but different lenses on the same truth. Could science one day validate the very mysteries it once sought to disprove? On March 14, 2018, another mathematical irony, Hawking died on Albert Einstein's birthday. The world mourned, not just because it lost a scientist, but because it lost a symbol. His body had long been paralyzed, but his mind had raced faster than most could imagine. He left behind more than equations. He left behind a warning, a challenge, and a mirror. Look into that mirror. Do you see a future of fire or a future of flight? Do you believe prophecy must come from magic, or can it come from math? As we come to the quiet end of this vast and turbulent journey, let us take one final glance at the man who dared to pull back the curtain on the cosmos. Stephen Hawking was no ordinary thinker. He was a paradox wrapped in equations. Confined to a chair yet unbound in thought. Silenced by disease yet louder than most. In his own soft mechanical voice, he told us of singularities and radiation, of time that had no beginning, and stars that could vanish into whispers. But he also told us of tomorrow. He warned us, not to frighten, but to awaken. He saw the patterns in our data, the danger in our innovations, and the fire in our future if we remain passive. Climate collapse, AI misalignment, genetic divides, planetary exodus. These were not scenes from dystopian fiction. To him, they were logical conclusions. And logic was never wrong. Yet in all his predictions, one thread remained constant: human agency. We too are part of this equation. We are not helpless in the face of fate. His life itself was proof. When told he had 2 years to live, he stayed for 5 more decades. When stripped of voice, he wrote bestsellers. When told the stars were out of reach, he drew their maps. In the end, perhaps his greatest legacy was not in what he taught us about the stars, but in what he showed us about ourselves. That to think deeply, to ask boldly, and to love the mystery is what makes us truly human. So when you next look up at the night sky, do not just see stars, see questions, and hear softly the voice of a man who never stopped asking.